Meeting of the Horry County Solid Waste Authority. Today is Friday, July the 31st, 3 o'clock. We're going to call it to order and ask Mr. Campbell to lead us in an invocation, please.
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the love and the blessings that you have heaped upon us. Continue to be with us and lead us in our decision-making process here today. Amen.
Amen. Mr. Graves, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You should have a copy of the agenda in front of you. Any changes or additions to the agenda? Not, we need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We did not have any public input request. The agenda item that we're here for today, as everybody knows, we're still working on the potential to accept out-of-county recyclables from Charleston County. I think there was some additional information. We're going to ask Ms. Britton to bring us up to speed on where we are at this point.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we did have the meeting yesterday with the County Council Committee, and
That was the admin committee?
that's correct, and
Thank you, sir.
several board members were there. Mr. Bessett made a short presentation and answered questions from the council members. Based on input from the committee, we did make some additional, I wouldn't say big changes, but we strengthened some of the language, made some of the language pertaining to reimbursement for expenses plainer. We added that to the attachments. And so we really, I would say the nature of the agreement has not changed, except that we reduced the termination for convenience from a 60-day to a 30-day termination, which cuts the authority's exposure should something come up that you didn't know about or anticipate and needed to cut your losses if you had to.
And that would include, I know that the recommendation or request came from Charleston County about the extension of the term of the contract from 1 to 2 years in order to negotiate more favorable trucking rates. If they did that, that still wouldn't impact our ability to exit with 30 days if they had.
No, but it would not, it should not inhibit our ability to do that, because the contract term itself that we can terminate for convenience is unambiguous, and they understand that we are keeping that in the contract. So even if they do negotiate that rate, they are still subject to the termination for convenience.
Okay.
Excuse me, what page are you on?
I was giving sort of an overview, Mr. Gray, but there was a termination for convenience clause.
I'm familiar with that clause, but I was going to try to follow along with the language, the red language.
Okay, if you will note on Exhibit 1, example of table to calculate cost, at the bottom we added, it's the exhibit at the very end. If you look at the bottom, we not only added some language, but bolded the language. At no time will county pay less than $135 a ton for the tonnage of recyclables delivered, making it clear that we did have a base amount of revenue we would receive per ton. We also added to the exhibit the language that if we get to the end of the contract and there are expenses that have not been reimbursed, that we're entitled to invoice those expenses and receive payment for those.
When would we receive payment?
In this provision, we said within 30 days of the date of the receipt of notice by Charleston.
Thank you.
This language, the language about the expenses is also in the contract itself, but since we had the table showing the example of cost calculation, we wanted to make it clear that the duty to, you know, tab up at the end didn't go away, or that we still had that base minimum.
Okay, it appeared to me that there was language in there as well that their bills would be paid every 30 days, or if we had a problem within 15 days and we gave them a,
There's a provision on page 2, paragraph F, that talks about the 15th day of the month
right.
and reimbursement to be submitted within 30 calendar days.
Okay, so this at the end of the contract doesn't mean all of that then. What it actually means is anything odd or unusual
Anything
that
odd
wasn't
or
done every
unusual that
30
somehow
days.
did not get caught or came up at the last minute, or,
That basically, if they opt out of the contract, they got to pay that pretty much new. But we're gonna be collecting and balancing checkbooks every month.
that's right. That's just if something unusual happened, out of the ordinary.
I had to do a quick read, but is there some aspect of the contract that says that they pay up at the end of the contract?
The only thing is this provision that if there's some unusual expense or the tally came up at the end a little bit different from the accounting during the year, that's sort of a safety net at the end to catch it and to get any unpaid, or they had not paid an invoice or it got overlooked. We can say at the end of the contract period, you know, we've reconciled our books. There are still these additional expenditures, or some additional expenditures came up at the end that were not in the last invoice. It just gives us a chance to, you know, double check and make sure that everything that the authority has spent that qualifies as an expense is paid.
So
But we-
everything-
It's like a final reconciliation of the account.
Thank you. So everything that's supposed to be paid along and along is to be paid in the manner that's been discussed. And this kind of a truing up catch-all at the end of it that, hey, we left this out, you owe us this now.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you.
Mr.
And
Campbell?
that is that's on a monthly basis.
That's right,
Sure.
they are to pay, and if they don't pay, you know, if there's an intentional failure to pay, that would be a breach of the agreement.
Sure.
I recommend that we just let Emerald go down page by page
Sure.
and
Can-
discuss the high points.
Yeah,
red
absolutely.
line,
Right.
Instead of,
Yeah, can I ask one question first before we do that? Going back to the example, and this might be a question for Danny or Mike, but on the, and I think I understand this and know the answer, but on the example from the tonnage received and the tonnage sold, the example of 3,000 tonnage received, and then it shows 2,220,
Difference sold, that would be the percentage of stuff that we do not sell. So we run it about, and that's some things on the glass, part of the glass we don't sell, like the sand, we use it on the thing. So all of that stuff that we would not sell is part of that 24%.
so that would not,
Be just the rejects alone.
okay, that was my question, because that
Yeah.
obviously was 27% or versus the 14 and a half.
Like we take wood out, for instance, and we bring it over here, we didn't sell it, it's a cost to the MRF, because we get wood sometimes in those things, we get, all kinds of different things, we get, metal, that stuff, all that stuff comes to different places, we don't actually sell it, and the revenue go back to the MRF.
And that's a historical percentage that
Yes.
you've utilized? Okay. All right. Ms. Britton, if we can just have you then go through line by line and talk about the changes?
Yes, Mr.
questions?
Chairman, on the first page of the agreement, you will find the whereas clauses, and these clauses really express the intent of the agreement, the authorization for entering into the agreement, and what in legal terms we call precatory language is sort of the introduction to the agreement. Then we get into the terms and conditions in section 1, and you see that the agreement,
He'd asked a preliminary question. This is what we want to have happen based on our latest, best thinking. And it's not necessarily what they have agreed to, this is just what we want to have happen so far. Is that correct?
this to them,
We do not, all right, we do not have a written response, and I guess there'll be a follow-up report on that when I finish from staff.
Yeah, silence gives consent. How long they had it, Danny?
3 or 4 hours.
Okay, thank you.
All right, on the terms and conditions, we have the agreement set for a 2-year term. Of course, it is subject to the termination clauses, which we'll get to later. There may be requests for extensions of terms that may be extended for 3 additional 6-month terms. There is a notice provision for there to be an extension, 90 days written notice before the end of whatever term is in effect, and then it's discretionary with the authority whether to grant the extension. It's not an automatic extension.
This is in which paragraph?
That is on paragraph 1B at the bottom of page 1. You will see requests for extension of term.
Okay,
It can only be extended upon consent of both the authority and Charleston. And if you go to the top of page 2, you will see the notice provisions and that the authority has 30 days to respond from receipt of the request. All right, then we will see in section C that Charleston would be delivering their recyclables during the scheduled receiving hours that are set forth in the agreement in another provision. And we established a minimum tonnage of 2,500 tons. This way, once the authority has ramped up with the sufficient personnel to meet the maximum tonnage, you're not going to have a waste of, personnel on site. So we guarantee a minimum as well as a maximum. The maximum was arrived at based on operational requirements of the equipment. And it's also specified how the material should be delivered, the form, because it is not to be compacted, because that would have an impact on the equipment that I understand would not be desirable. So we did the minimum and maximum tonnages and the manner in which it is to be delivered. We also have maximum load requirements of 12 to 14 tons per load. Again, this is an operational requirement. Really, this is where we have the 3-dimensional state for processing. So it's in section E that we specify the manner in which it is to be delivered. Section F, we address reimbursement of expenses. It provides that the county will pay the transportation cost for the county recyclables delivered, not to exceed $425 per load. However, the county's payment of those costs will be reimbursed back to the authority's payment of the county's transportation costs will be reimbursed back to the authority from the revenues generated from the recyclable sale. So that should be a wash. Then the rest of Section F talks about the accounting. No later than the 15th day of each month, Charleston County will submit a monthly payment report for the previous calendar month, and that will have its transportation costs delineated. And then the authority has 30 days from that to submit payment. Again, that payment will be an expense that will come out of the recyclable sales for reimbursement to the authority. Section G provides that Charleston County is to pay the expenses that the authority incurs for rendering services under this agreement. And there you see that should there be a shortfall of revenue from recyclables sold, the county would reimburse the authority for all unreimbursed or unpaid expenses, including transportation costs. The anticipation is that there will be sufficient revenue from which to make that deduct, but should something unforeseen happen and we end up having more expenses and the revenue's coming in, then Charleston County is contractually on the line to make that reimbursement directly. Section H, again, county's reimbursement to the authority for the expenditures. G dealt with the shortfall. H is the general provisions about the reimbursement for and the transportation cost, again, is an expense. And then there's a reference to the revenue cost sharing between the parties in this section. It says, except as otherwise provided, the county retains the revenue from the sales, and then we look down below, we'll look at what the division is.
Have we passed, page 3,
All right, we're just beginning on page 3.
we haven't gotten to I yet.
Not yet. We're going to take that one up now. The residue, in order to ensure that we do not get or receive truckloads of recyclables that has a really high rate of residue, the authority has set a percentage, 14.5%, as the baseline rate for determining if there's an increase in the residual rate. The county has retained the authority in Section J to reject loads containing more than 15% by weight of rejects. Or there can be an agreement upon an extra handling cost for those loads. The authority will have to provide notice to Charleston County and document what it finds with photographs and, any video showing that it was an improper load, improper amount of
I
rejects.
guess, I think that's a very strong protection for us not to get, too much residue or dregs, as Danny sometimes refers to them. But in a practical sense, I listened very carefully to Mike's presentation. In a practical sense of running the MRF, that we're going to mix it all together. There's really no way to separate. Okay, now we're going to run the conveyor or today or this shift on Charleston stuff, and then we're going to switch to Horry and vice versa. And so I guess, Mike, what I'm asking you is that what do you do? Just dump it out and take a visual look and use your experienced judgment to determine whether it's 14% or not?
Well, what we'll do is, because ours is running 14.5% and has run for the last 2 years, if the rate, we won't be running our stuff and then running Charleston's. It all comes in, it gets mixed together, it all runs the line together. Horry counties could be dumped, or Myrtle Beaches could be dumped in the afternoon right in the middle of Charleston's dumping theirs. It's going to get all mixed together. There's just no way to keep it separate. So our thought process was that if we're running 14.5% now, and we put in our expenses, we put a 14.5% cost in for Charleston's, even though Charleston's saying that their residual rate is 8% in FY15. But we didn't take that into account. We said, we know ours is 14.5%, has been for the last 2 years. So if our number starts moving up past 14.5%, let's say it goes to 15.5%, then Charleston's going to have to pick up the cost for that 1%. If it went to 20, they'd have to pick up 4.5% of that cost.
So it doesn't matter then. That's a very comforting thought. If we do find that our residual rate starts going up, they can't use the excuse, well, that will on account of somebody else's recyclables. We say, no, that's our judgment.
That was the goal to writing it that way.
That was a good way to do it. Now, how do we treat glass? Do we treat glass?
Glass comes out here, we grind it, we come out here and we sell it or use it for road, on our roads here, rather than buying coquina and rock to go on our roads, we use it here.
So-
Or either we sell it.
So glass as a commodity is not considered in this sense of residual. That's considered considered a product that we can sell or use.
Sell or use. And right now, we cannot keep enough glass for people buying it.
Well, just as a.
We're always running out.
A member of county council told me that he tried to help somebody, I guess a constituent, buy some, I call them glass marbles, but whatever it is, glass chips,
The aggregate, is what we call it.
aggregate, and was told that, well, we've sold everything to Greenville County, and I just passed that off. I said, well, it doesn't sound.
Now we sell everything to the public. People come in here every day, and there's people coming in wanting it, and we don't have any. Individually.
It just worked out. We got enough of it, and if,
No, we ain't got quite enough of it because we keep running out, but
well,
we'd like to be able to sell more of it.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not considered to be, in some domains, glass is considered to be non-desirable element to deal with. But we look on it as a saleable or usable commodity, and we are using or selling all of it, and so it's not counted in this residual.
And prior to us, just give you a little history, prior to us grinding that material and selling it, we weren't disposing of it then either. We were taking it to Raleigh, North Carolina, for it to be recycled. But we found out if we ground it ourselves, we could save about $30,000 a year in transportation costs and other things and sell it.
Okay, thank you very much.
There was a test plot though in Greenville early on, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, a couple, 3 years ago, they come down and got 3 or 4 loads of it to use it on a test spot to see how it worked as far as drainage and other things.
Well, after the meeting, I'll tell you who this councilman was, and maybe you
We
can
know.
help him get some glass for whomever he was talking about, if he was being sincere.
Mike, can I ask you a question? Have we sent truckloads of material back that brought stuff to the MRF that was not appropriate? Haven't we sent?
Yeah,
trucks
we've
back?
rejected loads currently of material that's been brought into here with our own current customers and told them, we ain't taking it here, you got too much contamination on it. I don't know what you're gonna do with it, but you can't dump it here. We do that currently.
So, you mean in our MRF operations now, we use our judgment, and
Yes.
we take a look
Yes, sir.
see, and if it looks like it's, not, it's kind of like people used to cheat on, whether it was C&D or MSW. We used to look in there and see.
Well, if you looked in there and saw a lot of food waste and electronics and that kind of stuff there, you'd reject it. Because we don't handle food waste up there.
Got it, thank you.
Or if it's compacted too much.
Or if it's
that
compacted.
Same way. Okay. Thank you, Mike.
All right, now we get,
I have one other question.
sir.
What do we plan?
I can't hear you, Mr. Gray,
I'm
in there.
sorry.
You should put that
Yeah,
thing.
I understand about not hearing. What do we plan to do with that residual?
We have the option to either charge Charleston County, which residual? Let me
Well,
clear
I
that
mean,
up.
as I understand it now, the residual, we just take it to the landfill, and the MRF pays the landfill $29 a ton to dispose of it that way.
That's right, that is correct. We put it in our expenses, as we were justifying our expenses, the additional, at 14.5%, the additional residual that there would be, and put in our expenses that the MRF would pay $29 a ton and give the county their $225 out of that.
But all of the residual that we develop goes to the landfill, right?
Currently it does, yes, sir.
And if it goes over 14, then Charleston would have to help pay that 25.
They would have to pay the additional cost.
Say again?
They'd have to pay that additional cost.
Right. I know in that discussion with, yesterday with, the admin committee, it may be more philosophical than it is actual impact, on our, lifespan of the landfill. But there was some concern that I heard from some of them about, well, why are we gonna be burying Charleston County, stuff in our landfill. And I guess the best answer is that it's really not that much. The consequence on a per-day basis, first, we get paid for it. Secondly, the consequence on the life of the landfill is not that great. Is that,
3.5 days.
I'm sorry?
3.5 days, and I can show you all that calculation if you want to look at it.
I
I've got it on
remember
a
that
sheet of
number.
paper.
Is that based on a monthly rate or a yearly rate?
I can show you, you want me to give them that paper?
All you need to do is just tell me whether that's a year or a month.
That's a year, Mr. Gray. Yeah, 3.5 days a year,
I would say that's rather inconsequential.
right.
Thank you very much.
I got the actual calculation of how I did it here if you want to see it.
The
Mr.
chairman
Chairman.
answered the question. Thank you. I
All right,
think that
Mr.
as we deal with county council, to say we're listening, it's only 3.5 days a year, but then there are other benefits that come out of this deal that, cash-on-cash benefits.
Should offset,
That
Yep,
offset
should
or more
offset
than
it.
offset that.
especially considering the airspace that's saved already by the MRF and the factory and, right. Yeah, the 206 days that's saved through
Thank you.
so far, yeah. Thank you, Mike. Yes, ma'am. Oh,
I was going to sort of explain. it to
okay,
you.
yeah, that's fine.
This is how I came up with 3.5 days, and if you look at the top, Charleston said their residual was about 8% for FY 15. So basically what I did is took 8% of the 36,000 tons a year that they're going to do, which equal to 2,880 tons a year. And then I took our tonnage that coming into the landfill, divided it by 52 weeks. We operate 5.5 days a week. And that says that we're going to be putting, that we're taking in an average of 813 tons a day. And then I took that and divided it by the residual, which give me 3.5 days. That's sort of simple, down and dirty. Bill does a little bit different calculation. He's got compaction ratios, and in his, he's got more of an engineering type thing that he does, where he reports to y'all. In his model, it's 3.09, not even 3.1 in it, but his model that he does.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next we get to section 2 of the agreement, the revenue sharing between parties. I'm trying to give a simple explanation of this. If we get into the math too much, we may need Mike to kind of help us here. But basically, a base market value of $150 per ton has been set as the agreement between the parties of sort of a baseline rate. And the payment methodology is set forth in section 8. You'll have your baseline, and then you'll have the current market value, which is defined in here as the net value per ton of recyclables delivered during the previous calendar month as calculated using the methodology provided in Exhibit 1. There's a leeway, 10% up and down on the base market value before a revenue sharing is triggered. If you look in B, payment calculations, if the CMV is between $135 and $165, no payments to either party. If the CMV is $170, you go to a 40% of $5 a ton that is paid to Charleston, which equals $2 a ton. And then there's another example, example 3. The $135 amount on the low end is in excess of what it cost us to pay to recycle a ton, which I thought was the key fact to know, if this was a sustainable calculation. if you have more detailed questions on how this works, I think Mike will have to come to the podium. I don't know if that's kind of a,
What that basically means is we can't lose money.
That's exactly
you
what it
know,
means. What, basically what it is,
that's the way it should work.
our cost to process currently today, our cost to process is about 95 or $100. It was average like 90, last time we looked at it, it was $91.61 to process each ton of waste. That covered all our costs at the MRF. So if it was still that today, we would be making about $42 or so. Quick calculation in my head. About $43 per ton that we're making today off of each ton we take into the MRF. That's, just forget about Charleston. That's what we're making today. And what we did with this calculation is we said, well, current average market value is $134 a ton. We want it to stay at that. And if we process Charleston's, we want to continue to make $42 a ton. So we said, in order to do that, we had to set something to do it that way. So we set it at $134. So if it drops to $135, they start paying to make sure we maintain that $42 a ton for their material and ours. Now, we do believe that because of several reasons that our efficiencies will get better. All the statistical information you can look at, all the people I've talked to that's got MRFs will tell you a good operating MRF will take in about 4,000 tons a month. That's a good operating number, and you need that to make it run pretty good. You can go to the EPA website and their sites that they've done studies on. It'll tell you that. And when you get to there, your cost gets to be about $75 to $80 a ton. So I'm saying, well, if it does that, if we're typical, in what we're doing, then our cost should drop. So we would no longer be making $42, we'd be making $60 a ton. I didn't physically calculate the numbers, but somewhere in that number. So if our efficiencies get better, as they typically do when you process more material.
Sure.
So that was that.
Economies of scale.
But we don't, in these calculations, and I'm sure you had a very sharp pencil when you used them, we don't include any depreciation costs or general administrative costs. We're just talking about the operation of the MRF itself.
The $91 includes the depreciation of $30 a ton. So it's actually physically costing us about 60 some.
I'm sorry.
It's physically costing, if you took the depreciation out of our number now, currently today, we'd be about $61 a ton.
So the numbers you have for us include depreciation?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And Jan's the one that did those numbers and she'll be glad to answer those for you.
And all the expenses of the MRF is in that
91.
number.
Right, all the expenses related with the MRFs in that $91.
Except, of course, the G&A, which is a different.
The only part of it didn't cover, and Jan, if you would, please answer that. You got the mic right there if you want to.
When in that $91 is all expenses, all of their fixed costs as well as any operational costs. And when we made the calculation, when we were doing these figures, what we did was we took out the fixed cost because we knew we were starting a second shift. We doubled all the operational costs and added back in the fixed costs. So therefore, we weren't doubling the depreciation when we were doing a calculation. So when we came up with the new cost to process, which was, like I said, I don't remember what it was.
It ended up being about $65 is what it is.
That does still include depreciation, includes all of their expenses, plus additional expenses that we think it'll take to operate a second shift.
And then that's when I said, well, the research that I've done, it's been about the mid-70s or higher. So let's add some additional costs back into it to get that number back up. And that's when we went back in at that time and added that $60,000 back in there to get that processing cost back up to where I thought it should be.
Jan, is our, the cost that we're estimating for Charleston's cost, we'll split profits and all, does it include a charge to them for depreciation or wear and tear on equipment and so forth?
The depreciation cost is in there, yes, sir.
Oh, good.
And
So
and
there-
additional maintenance costs.
That's right.
Okay, well, I was, in my feeble mind, I was misunderstanding or misinformed that we weren't charging them for the new wear and tear that we're gonna get,
Oh, yes, sir.
but we are.
Yes, sir.
And so our depreciation allowance, that we set aside every year will go up, should go up markedly, frankly.
The depreciation cost will not go up, no, sir. Now, the cost itself per ton decreases because we're processing more material, but the actual depreciation cost will not increase.
But you're telling me that there is a charge to, in this case, Charleston County, there is a charge for the additional wear and tear that we're gonna experience.
Yes, sir. The additional maintenance costs, any repair costs are included, yes, sir. And those are additional costs beyond, because those aren't a fixed cost, they're an additional operating cost. Yes, sir. Those are built in. We did increase those.
You one smart cookie. Thank you.
I had a lot of help, thank you.
Any other questions for Mike about the calculations? Okay, we'll move forward. Ms. Britton, thank you.
All right. Section 3 deals with liability and insurance. Both sides required to carry insurance. We've specified through the South Carolina Insurance Reserve Fund, anticipating that would be who they carry theirs with. We haven't heard anything to the contrary on that. Also, we've added the prohibition of biohazardous waste in one of the later drafts. We certainly don't want to be responsible or want to be able to contact them to come back and get any biohazardous waste in accordance with any requirements that apply to it that may have inadvertently been included. Then we go to the termination provision. We have a for convenience termination where either party by 30 days advance written notice may terminate the agreement. There's a for cause, violation of law, state, federal laws, or breach of the agreement would be for cause, and then default. If they failed to pay and refused to pay after notice that an amount is owed, they failed to pay, we'd give them 30 days notice that we consider this a breach of the agreement. You have a right to cure because, of course, we'd rather receive payment and keep operating. If they didn't pay or if they kept sending non-compliant loads that became a burden on the authority, we could give notice of default, give them an opportunity to cure the default. So that would be a third way of termination if a default is not cured. And John, I know you know all this.
And I'm assuming that for cause and for default, that would have to be proven, but doesn't the for convenience kind of cover all that?
Well, when you would terminate, if you wanted to terminate immediately because of something really bad that's happened.
Without the 30 days?
Without the 30
Okay,
days,
I
that
gotcha.
would be cause.
I gotcha.
If you didn't really want to terminate, but they're not doing something right, that if they'll fix it, you're okay with everything, like late payment or non-compliant load weights, then you would give the notice and say, hey, let's get this problem fixed because we want to keep doing business, but you've got 30 days to do it. So that kind of would be the atmosphere that you'd usually have around the different kinds of termination.
Okay.
That 30 days, didn't we have that at 60?
We did it one time, and there was some, I think it gives a greater comfort level. There were some questions from the admin committee yesterday about the time period, and they felt like if you were at a situation where you needed to get out of it, it would probably be a very good reason, and you might be in a better position to have the 30 than the 60 on this end if the authority wanted to get out quick. Now, if something was happening and you wanted to get out of it, and you wanted to give 60, if you could get by for the 60, but this gives you the right to give 30 and get out fast if you needed to.
I was at the admin committee meeting yesterday, as you know, and I remember hearing that. And I can understand that to a degree, but we're gonna have startup costs, and we're gonna have a lot of work involved in this, and a lot of our administrative time. And where Charleston, let's say, decide they really didn't like everything here. And we have spent the administrative time, and we've changed some things at the landfill to be able to take those loads. 30 days might put us in a position of losing some money that we really wouldn't want to lose. So I don't know if 30 days was a deal breaker with Charleston. I'd prefer to have 60 days for us and for them. Whatever we do, in my opinion, should be fair to us and fair to them, because there may be a day in the future when we have to use Charleston or have to ask them. And I would want them to deal as fairly and economically with us as we are going to with them here, instead of having a problem. But like I said, we've got startup costs. We're gonna have to change some things to be able to do this. We're gonna have to hire people. I'd rather it be 60 days.
Mr. Jones?
Am I understanding you correctly, it got changed from 60 to 30 because of the opinion of the admin committee?
I'm just saying there seemed to be a better comfort level with it going from 60 to 30,
Comfort level for them, for admin?
based on discussions in that meeting, right?
Okay. But Charleston asked us for 60 days to help with their trucking. And I agree with what she said, and I don't, they're over a barrel right now, I agree with that, but I don't want to make an enemy out of them to start with. They haven't asked us for much, and I would much prefer to see the 60 days in than I had the 30. That's one of the few things they've asked for.
Do I understand that Charleston County asked for the 60? Is that correct? Or,
Actually, the board asked for 90, and then it got cut back to 60, and then because of a request from a meeting we had with county administration and lawyer for it to be cut back to 60, and then after the admin committee, it was cut back to 30. The agreement with the board said we want a 90-day out clause, and Charleston said, I want 2 years. And they said, okay. We'll do the 90-day clause for 2 years. And now 30 days in 2 years.
I think the admin committee's decision on the 30 days was if, in fact, we were losing or not making money or losing quite a bit of money on a daily basis, that would help us get out of that quicker. I think with what we have in here that guarantees our payment would go a long way if they actually understood that, and I don't think that was explained to them to the point that they knew in this contract that we cannot lose money and we are going to make money. And so it's not that important with the way this contract is written. We're not going to lose $1,000 a day, I think came up. And I don't think that was explained to them fully to where they could understand that and be comfortable with that. If it had been, I don't think that would have been that big a problem. I also don't think they were aware of the startup cost and the things that we had with the 30 days. And I don't think they were aware of the fact that Charleston needed the 60 days to make it more economical and to work with the trucking people they were going to use, which actually benefits us as well. So I'm not sure that the admin committee understood these things to that degree. I don't believe they'd have that kind of a problem with the 30 days if they were really aware of all that. That's my opinion.
with the 60 days rather than go to 60 days rather than 30. Right.
I don't think they would have that problem with the 60 days if
Right.
they understood the three issues that I just explained, if they were aware of that.
I would like to say that, I know we're saying, several people have said there's no way to lose money. There is always a way, there's always something that can happen to make you lose money. And, so that has not come from legal counsel, that there's no way to lose money.
I
just wanna
think,
make that
I think council's aware they can too, in some of their contracts.
You never know what may happen. And, it's, like I said, it's a comfort level thing. I do think we've taken a good bit out of here that Charleston did ask for, or that they have asked for a number of other things. They've wanted more profit and revenue and some things like that. But that's just been during the course of the negotiations, as I understand.
That's correct. They've asked for, if we started making a lot of money off of the material that and our cost for processing went down, that we consider maybe sharing that with them. I think one of the main things with them was that when we took out the ability to negotiate if something wasn't working, is probably one of the biggest things they're having a problem with now, because they say the only thing we have now is termination. We can't work out nothing, because there's no way to negotiate the contract or change it or amend it, even if both parties agreed. All you got to do is a 30-day out. And that's I think, is one of the biggest sticking points with it.
Why was that taken out?
Emma Ruth and I discussed it, and she felt like it should be out.
Or we're talking about between 30 and 60.
No, negotiation.
If you want to go into executive session on the negotiations, we'll do that.
Thank you. I'd like to.
We have a motion, a second, go into executive session. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll go into executive session.
And Mr. Chairman, please let the record reflect that the executive session is for the purpose of discussing contractual matter.
I make a motion that we come out of executive session.
Thank you. I have a motion to come out of executive session and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Britton?
Mr. Chairman, let the record reflect that the executive session was held for discussion of a contractual matter. No action was taken in the executive session.
Thank you. Proceeding through the contract.
I think we got one, two, for default.
Yes. All right. Next, we have a force majeure clause, which the most likely impact would be hurricane or flood. But that is in the event of a catastrophic event, operations could be suspended under the contract. Then we have what we would call kind of boilerplate or typical provisions that both parties are going to comply with all of the applicable local, federal, state laws, rules, and regulations pertaining to the operations. The procedure for sending notices to the parties is specified. The fact that this is the entire agreement between the parties, that there are no outside agreements, is also specified. That if a section of the agreement is stricken for some reason of law, that the unaffected provisions could continue to be in effect. That venue will be in Horry County, South Carolina, should there be a dispute that's brought into court. And then we have the attachment, Exhibit 1, which consists of a two-page exhibit setting forth examples of how cost calculations are made and showing that this example is subject to the provisions relating to the payment obligations of all expenses. We could do them now, 1A and 1B, just to make it easier to refer to. It's really, it just says Exhibit 1 at the top of one of the pages, so we might want to just number the pages on the bottom, 1A and 1B, as page numbers.
Any questions, comments about the proposed changes?
Mr. Chairman, is it necessary for us to have to make a motion to recommend a change to this?
I would think so.
Has the actual proposed agreement ever been voted on? I know it's been presented. Well, that was going to be my recommendation. I don't believe it's had a prior vote. I think it's been provided for information.
Correct.
And so I think what we could do is have a vote contained within the vote that that provision be amended to reflect a different notice, number of days for notice.
That's what I...
Yes, and do it in one vote.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we change the time from 30 days back to 60 days where it was previously.
Second.
Now, is this where we decided we didn't need a motion to make the change, or
Thought
that we just
decided
talked about,
we
or?
did.
What we discussed was, I mean, you can certainly do it that way, was entertaining a motion to accept the agreement with the change in paragraph, with a change in paragraph 4, revising it to provide.
Ms. Jones, if you can modify your motion to accept the contract with that change.
Let me, whatever they say. We can do that. It was
We
three
have a
lawyers,
motion to
whatever they
accept the
say.
contract with the changes, including the change in paragraph 4 from 30 days back to 60 days on the convenience clause.
Yes, sir.
I second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Would,
Sloan?
would it be, you said just for the convenience, but would it be the termination for section 4, subsection A and C? Are we changing everything in the section 4 from 30 days to 60 days?
My understanding was the default would stay at 30 days.
Okay, okay.
So we have the motion and the second to accept the changes in the contract with the addition of the convenience clause going from 30 to 60 days. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Now, operationally, I know contractually, we've talked about the contract. Operationally, I know that there's a concern and the discussion needs to take place about what happens with the rejects or where does that go, the materials that aren't able to be recycled. And I think we need to have that discussion and make sure everybody's comfortable with that.
Let me say that our proposal and our expenses are based on our landfill, our tipping fees, and the trucking distance to get them here. That's already covered in our existing proposal and budget figures. So, anything else would be additional funding up and above these expenses.
In my opinion, as we've seen that's been figured for the last year or so, of how many days that we have saved on a lot of different things, and I think with some of the new things we're doing, we're going to save more days. That 3 days to 4 days within a year's period is rather minute, and I think it should stay here. I think that will stop a lot of problems and different discussions on that, and I just think 3 days for a year's period, I don't have any problem with that.
And I agree with that. I think philosophically, we do want to save airspace in the landfill, and we are doing that with the current MRF operations and with the factory. And I agree that the 3 to 4 days per year is insignificant in the big picture with this opportunity that's been placed before us to be able to operate at full capacity or fuller capacity with the facilities that we have. Any other comments about that or discussion?
I make a recommendation then that we keep the as we've been calling them, dregs here at solid waste.
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion, but just for
Okay.
discussion
Okay.
operationally that,
All right.
yeah. Okay, anything else about the contract? Okay, sure, yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to make the comment that I appreciate all the hard work from the board and the staff. I think that the intent has always been to develop a contractual arrangement that's a partnership. We would like for it to be beneficial for Horry County and for Charleston County. And I think that we've done that with the terms and conditions that have been put forth. So I think that it protects both parties with the arrangements that we have. It gives both parties an opportunity to address needs and concerns that we have, and I think it really is a true partnership. And so I feel good about what we've done, and thank everybody for the hard work to get to the point that we are now.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. This has been one exercise. We know more about our MRF today than we've known, I guess, forever. The operations, the expenses and everything. So unless we get a total no out of Charleston this afternoon, we're gonna start taking their materials Monday morning, ramping up. And that's the only really thing that I think that we can do. We've already taken some test loads. The materials is pretty good stuff. So we will start working with their materials Monday morning. Now, we won't have 10 trucks out there Monday morning at 5 o'clock, but I don't know how many, what they're talking about bringing first, but we'll start working with them Monday morning.
Thank you. I'd also like to say, I do appreciate Charleston thinking of us and giving us this opportunity. And with all due respect, anytime they'd like to talk with us or visit or whatever and what we can do to work with them, I'd sure like to do that.
Well, they offered to be here today for this meeting, and we didn't think we needed them right yet, but we have invited them. One of their council members has been to the MRF this past week, so we will extend the invitation for them to come up and see where the materials are being handled.
Great. Any further business before the board?
I would like to bring up a matter that came up at our last board meeting. It had to do with change in the way that we're going to do the appeals committee. And after consultation with you, Mr. Chairman, and also with Ms. Britton, our attorney, we're going to keep our 9 o'clock meeting Monday morning of the existing appeals committee, and we're going to follow the convention of our bylaws and convention as they exist today. And then any further changes that need to be made in our procurement code or our bylaws or our rules can be made at a later appropriate time, but we're going to stick with what we started with for right now.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Gray. Any further business, comments? If not, we'll accept a motion for adjournment. Thank you. Appreciate everybody.